You're nothing but a deckhand, Ethan. Jack will be captain one day. You'll always be nothing. I won't waste another year on scraps when Jack can give me the life I deserve." Those were the venomous words Claire Cole spat at her husband. On the Charleston docks, her laughter ringing out as she slipped her arm through the first mate's and left Ethan humiliated in front of the crew. But what she didn't know was that Ethan Cole's silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. He wasn't just a dismissed deckhand. He was the hidden heir to the entire shipping empire, already orchestrating a revenge so brutal it would leave Jack in chains and Claire begging for mercy she'd never receive. Viewers, if your partner betrayed you in front of everyone, would you walk away quietly? Or would you wait for the perfect moment to strike? What would you do if the person you loved most betrayed you for status, only to discover you held the power to destroy them? Share your answer in the comments. The harbor erupted with laughter the moment Claire's voice sliced through the air like a whip. She stood tall on the pier in her shimmering dress, fingers stabbing toward the man who had once been her world. "You lost your job as a deckhand. Ethan, you're nothing now," she spat, her words echoing louder than the crash of waves. Then, with a cruel smirk, she slipped her arm into the first mate's, announcing for all to hear, "I'd rather be his wife than waste another day with you." The sailors roared, mocking the man left standing in silence. Ethan's head lowered, but behind his calm eyes burned a storm no one could see. For while she believed she was leaving a broken husband for a rising first mate, the truth was far sharper. Ethan Cole was not just a deckhand. Unbeknownst to her, he owned the very shipping line she thought she had traded him beneath. And from that betrayal would rise a revenge so brutal it would sink them both. The Charleston harbor stirred alive with its usual symphony. Cranes groaning as they lifted crates, ropes slapping against steel, and the briny air thick with the calls of sailors. Ethan Cole moved among them with quiet precision, his sun darkened, hands gripping the heavy mooring rope as if the ship itself relied on him. He tied the knot tight against the dock post, the muscles in his forearm flexing beneath a faded work shirt. Behind him, Claire Cole's heels tapped against the wooden planks, an elegant rhythm out of place in the dirt and grit of the harbor. Her yellow sundress caught the morning light, fluttering like she belonged to another world entirely. Arms folded, lips curled, she looked at her husband with the kind of disdain that made silence louder than shouting. "You're nothing but a deckhand, Ethan," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the ruckus of the pier. "Day after day I watch you break your back for pennies while other men climb higher. The first mate has ambition. You're stuck scrubbing decks." Several dock workers glanced their way, pausing mid-task, grins tugging at their mouths. One nudged another, whispering just loud enough, "Poor bastard's wife wants a man in uniform, not a man with rope burns." Ethan's gaze didn't rise. His silence wasn't weakness, it was armor. He pulled the rope tighter, the only sound the squeak of the fibers stretching. A flicker of something unspoken passed through his eyes, a storm hidden beneath calm waters. Claire stepped closer, her perfume clashing with the salt of the sea. "Do you hear me, Ethan? I won't waste my life with a man satisfied with scraps." Her voice cracked for a moment, not with pity but with hunger. Hunger for more than the man in front of her could offer. A horn blared from the Atlantic Star, drowning the moment. But the words had already echoed down the pier, caught in the ears of men who would not forget. Ethan released the rope, wiping his hands against his trousers. His thumb brushed against the sleeve where his watch was hidden. An old compass watch, worn but gleaming beneath fabric. The memory of a voice whispered back at him, "You must earn respect as a man, not as a name." His mother's words, his father's legacy. Flashback. A boy of 9 sitting cross-legged on a wooden floor, his father, Richard Cole, kneeling to his level. The gold compass watch dangled before him. This isn't just a watch, Ethan. It's a reminder. When you lead men, they'll follow not because of this name, Cole, but because you've walked where they walk. One day you'll understand. Back in the present, Ethan straightened, the horn still echoing in his chest. Claire turned away, heels striking the planks as she muttered, "Jack would never settle for this." The name hung in the air like a poisoned hook. Jack Turner, the first mate. Ethan's eyes followed her retreating figure, but his face remained unreadable. The sailor's laughter carried behind him, rough and mocking. He pulled the sleeve down over the watch, hiding it again. But the storm in his eyes didn't fade. It deepened. Why does he stay calm while his wife humiliates him? What storm brews behind that silence? The day after Claire's venomous words, the harbor seemed louder than usual, or perhaps it was only Ethan's ears straining against every sound. The seagulls screamed overhead, the winches rattled, and the deck beneath his boots trembled as crates shifted. He worked with steady hands, but something in the air felt off, a tension, like the calm before a storm. Captain Reeves, a broad-shouldered man with silver hair and a temper sharpened by decades at sea, stormed across the deck of the Atlantic Star. His face was flushed, his voice already raised. "Who tied this line?" Ethan's head lifted. The line in question had frayed overnight. Strands snapped as though cut. His gut sank. "I did, sir," Ethan answered, stepping forward. Jack Turner, the first mate, stood at the captain's side with a smirk tucked carefully under his mustache. He looked the part. Pressed uniform, polished boots, and that constant air of superiority. "Told you, Captain, coal's slipping. Can't even tie a rope without endangering the ship." "It wasn't," Ethan began, but the captain cut him off with a bark. "Don't argue, Cole. You've been with us long enough to know better. One mistake could cost lives. You're finished here." The words fell like an anchor. The sailors gathered nearby exchanged knowing looks. Some muttered under their breath. Ethan caught one whisper. "First mate's been gunning for him. Guess he finally got what he wanted." Jack clapped Ethan's shoulder with mock sympathy, his grip lingering too long. "Sorry, friend. Some men just aren't cut out for the higher ranks. Don't take it too hard." His eyes slid toward the dock, where Claire stood waiting, arms folded, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Ethan met her gaze, searching for even a flicker of loyalty. Instead, she gave a small nod of approval toward Jack, as if confirming her choice without words. The captain shoved a paper into Ethan's hand. Notice of dismissal. No ceremony, no chance to explain. Just an end. Ethan tucked the paper into his pocket, the gold compass beneath his sleeve pressing against his skin like a reminder of promises unfulfilled. Flashback. Ethan, at 24, hunched over books in a cramped apartment studying maritime law after long shifts on the docks. His friends laughed at him for wasting time with legal codes instead of whiskey, but his mother's voice pushed him forward. You can't lead a fleet without knowing how the tides of men and law both work. Every night he had imagined this moment, not of humiliation but of rising. Back in the present, Ethan descended the gangplank in silence. Claire stepped forward, her perfume cutting through the salt air. "I told you," she said coldly. "Jack's a man with vision. He'll be captain one day, and you're nothing now." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "If that's what you believe, Claire, then you've already made your choice." Jack's laughter followed them, low and triumphant. "Best not to look back, Cole. Some ships sail without you." Ethan walked past them, not glancing back, but every step felt heavier with memory. The sailors' jeers trailed him, but his silence was not defeat. It was fuel. Why does Ethan accept disgrace without protest? What secret path is he walking that neither Jack nor Claire can see? The weeks that followed Ethan's dismissal blurred into whispers and humiliation. Each time he walked past the harbor, men who once worked beside him either turned away or laughed outright. But it wasn't the sailor's mockery that cut deepest. It was the sight of Claire, no longer arriving at the docks to meet him, but standing beside Jack Turner with her chin lifted high, her hand looped through his arm like she had always belonged there. One evening, Ethan sat in his small rented apartment, a single bulb flickering above him. He unfolded the dismissal notice again, though he knew every word by heart. The paper trembled in his hand, not from weakness, but from a weight he could not yet reveal. His sleeve slipped back, and the golden compass watch glinted faintly in the dim light. He traced its face with his thumb, the memory of his father's hand pressing it into his palm flooding back. Flashback. Richard Cole's study smelled of tobacco and sea maps. The elder Cole's voice was low but steady. Our family owns more than ships, Ethan. We own trust. But one day you'll have to prove to the men that you're one of them, not above them. Until then, the Cole shipping line stays in trusteeship. When you've earned every rank, when you've been the lowest and the overlooked, then, and only then, the company will return to you. The words had lived in Ethan's bones since boyhood. And now, ironically, being fired was the final chain breaking, the last requirement fulfilled. But no one knew. Not Claire, not Jack. The following Sunday, Claire appeared at Ethan's door. Her dress shimmered, her lips painted bright. She didn't come in. She didn't even glance at the cracked wallpaper or the narrow hallway. "I came to tell you it's over," she said bluntly. "Jack asked me to dinner, and I said yes. He's got a future, Ethan. He's already acting captain in everything but name. He can give me the life I deserve. I won't waste another year in shadows with you." Ethan's eyes rose slowly to meet hers. For a moment her resolve flickered under the calm weight of his gaze. "If that's what you want, Claire," he said evenly, "then go." She scoffed, masking her unease with cruelty. "You don't even fight for me. That's the problem. You never fight." She turned on her heel, leaving the faintest trace of perfume and finality behind her. Later that night, Ethan walked the pier alone. He paused before the Atlantic Star, lights glowing on its deck, Jack's laughter carrying faintly across the water. Claire's silhouette leaned against the rail beside him, her head tilted in a way Ethan remembered all too well, the way she once leaned against him. His hand tightened on the compass watch, the metal warm against his skin. What they didn't know, and what no one on that ship knew, was that in just a few weeks the trustees would call. The line would no longer belong to Captain Reeves or the first mate who schemed behind his back. It would belong to Ethan Cole. Claire has chosen Jack openly, but what will happen when the man she dismissed as nothing becomes the one with everything? The once proud Atlantic Star sat moored like a disgraced giant, her decks crawling with investigators and clerks. Boxes were opened, papers seized, sailors questioned. What once rang with laughter and ambition now echoed with suspicion. Jack Turner's swagger had shriveled into paranoia, his uniform damp with sweat as agents cornered him in his own cabin. "Fuel shortages that don't exist," one agent barked, tossing a folder of receipts onto the desk. "Phantom cargo runs. Embezzled pay," Jack stammered, his face flushing crimson. "It's a mistake. A clerical—" "Save it for the magistrate," the agent cut in, snapping cuffs over his wrists. The clink of steel reverberated through the ship like a bell of judgment. On the pier below, sailors leaned against posts, watching as their first mate was marched out in irons. Whispers surged. "Thought he was untouchable. Cole warned us without saying a word." Claire pushed her way through the crowd, her silk gown dragging against the filthy planks. She grabbed Jack's arm, her voice trembling. "Tell them it isn't true, Jack. Tell them." Jack jerked away, his eyes wild. "You think I planned this? You think I wanted this?" Spittle flew as his voice cracked. "You chose me, Claire. You wanted ambition. Well, here it is." The agents shoved him forward, leaving Claire behind, pale and shaken. The murmurs of the sailors cut her like knives. She had married power, but power was being dragged away in chains. At that very moment, Ethan watched from a distance, leaning against a polished black car. His suit was immaculate, his posture calm. To the untrained eye, he looked like a businessman passing by. To Claire, when her eyes finally found him, he looked like a ghost returned to life. Their gazes locked across the dock. Her lips parted as if to speak, but Ethan gave no signal, no acknowledgement. He simply turned and entered the car, the door closing with a muted finality. Flashback. Claire at 21, laughing as she and Ethan danced barefoot in their small apartment. "You'll take me places, Ethan," she had whispered then, her voice full of hope. "Not just across seas, but higher. Promise me you won't settle." Ethan had kissed her forehead and murmured, "I'll give you everything, but in time." Now, standing alone as her husband was carted away, she felt that memory shatter like glass. The man who had once promised her everything was now the one man who didn't even look her way. That night, Claire slipped into her chambers and poured herself another glass of wine. Her hands shook as she whispered aloud as though confessing to the empty room. "I made a mistake. God help me, I chose wrong. Outside her window, the harbor pulsed with new life. Dock workers spoke Ethan's name with reverence. Captains whispered it in awe. The compass of the fleet had shifted, and all paths pointed back to him. Ethan's revenge had begun not with fire or fury, but with silence, patience, and the cruelest weapon of all, letting them destroy themselves. Claire's regret burns. But what will she do when she learns Ethan's silence hides not just justice, but a brutal plan that includes her? The night Jack was dragged away in irons, Claire sat alone in the grand cabin of the Atlantic Star. The chandeliers still glowed, but the room felt hollow, like a theater after the play had ended. She stared at the untouched wine on the table, her reflection fractured in the crystal glass. For years she had told herself she deserved more than Ethan's quiet strength. Yet here she was, abandoned in the wreckage of her own choices. When whispers reached her ears that Ethan now controlled the shipping line, she laughed at first, bitter and disbelieving. Impossible, she muttered. But as day after day passed and every sailor spoke his name with reverence, denial gave way to a gnawing truth. The man she had spat on had become the master of everything. Desperation broke through her pride. One evening, Claire left her cabin. No silks, no jewels, only a plain shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She walked the cobbled streets of Charleston until she reached the company's new headquarters. Once a trustee office, now carrying the Cole name again in bold letters. Inside, Ethan's secretary stiffened at the sight of her. "Mrs. Turner," she said flatly. "Claire," she corrected, her voice trembling. "Just Claire." She waited, eyes darting to the heavy oak door where Ethan worked late into the night. Moments later, the door opened. Ethan stepped out, papers in hand, his tailored suit catching the golden lamplight. His gaze landed on her, steady, unreadable. "Ethan," she breathed, the name fragile on her lips. For a moment, silence stretched. She remembered the young man who once laughed with her barefoot on creaky apartment floors, who promised her the world. But the man before her was colder, carved by storms she had never bothered to weather with him. She reached for him, voice breaking. "I made a mistake. I chose wrong. Jack, he's ruined, and I don't belong in that ruin. Please, Ethan, forgive me. Take me back." His eyes flickered, not with anger, but with a patience sharpened into cruelty. "Take you back?" he repeated softly. Then he leaned closer, his voice low, intimate. "Claire, when you left, I learned something. Love isn't proven by rings or vows. It's proven by who stays when the ship sinks." Her lips quivered. "Ethan, you didn't stay." He straightened, turning to his secretary. "See Mrs. Turner out." Claire froze, her hand still half raised, her heart pounding in her ears. She wanted to scream, to claw at him, but the cold finality in his eyes silenced her. As the secretary led her away, Ethan returned to his office. On his desk lay Jack's ledgers, evidence of every theft, every betrayal. Next to them, a list of names. Sailors Jack had underpaid, captains he'd deceived. Ethan circled each name with steady precision. This wasn't just business anymore. This was the beginning of a revenge that would leave no corner untouched. Not Jack, not Claire, not anyone who had laughed when Ethan's head hung low. Ethan has rejected Claire. But what form will his brutal revenge take when the courtroom and the harbor both become his stage? The courthouse in Charleston brimmed with spectators that morning, every bench filled with sailors, merchants, and townsfolk eager to see the trial of Jack Turner. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind usually reserved for hangings or great spectacles. For weeks, rumors of theft and fraud had rippled through the harbor like waves, and now justice was about to crest. Jack was marched in, shackled, his once pristine uniform stained and wrinkled. The swagger that once drew men to follow him was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. He scanned the room, searching for sympathy, but found only the cold glares of men he had underpaid, cheated, or mocked. Claire sat stiffly in the front row, pearls still at her throat, though they seemed to choke her now. Her eyes darted to Ethan, seated calmly near the front, a stack of documents before him. The prosecutor slammed a ledger onto the stand. "Evidence shows Mr. Turner falsified shipping records, skimmed off cargo profits, and diverted company funds into personal accounts. Witnesses will testify to his schemes. The damage totals more than $100,000. Gasps filled the room. Jack leapt to his feet, veins bulging in his neck. "It's a lie. This is Cole's doing. He set me up." The judge silenced him with a gavel. "Sit down." Ethan rose smoothly when called to the stand. He wore no emotion, only the composure of a man who had waited his whole life for this moment. He handed over ledgers, receipts, and sworn testimonies. His voice was steady. These books were not tampered with. They were preserved from the time I was still a deckhand. Jack Turner wrote his own ruin long before I touched these pages. Jack glared at him, desperation dripping from his words. You knew. You knew and you let me— Yes, Ethan interrupted, his tone like ice. I let you dig your grave because men like you don't stop unless they're exposed in front of everyone they fooled. Claire's face burned as the crowd murmured. For the first time, she understood. Ethan hadn't been weak. He had been patient. Patient enough to watch her leave. Patient enough to let Jack's greed crush him without lifting a hand. The verdict came swift. Guilty on all counts. Jack was sentenced to years in prison. His name disgraced, his ambitions destroyed. As the gavel fell, the sound echoed like the final toll of a bell. Claire stumbled after Ethan as he left the courtroom. Her voice cracked, desperate. Ethan, please. You've made your point. Jack is finished. I know I was blind, I know I betrayed you. But we can start over. I still love— Ethan stopped, turned just enough for his eyes to meet hers. There was no warmth there, only the weight of storms weathered. Claire, you don't love me. You love the crown you thought I'd never wear. But crowns mean nothing to me now. You made your choice, the crowd surged past, leaving Claire standing alone in her pearls, the courthouse steps feeling higher and colder than any gallows. Jack is ruined, Claire humiliated, but what final stroke will Ethan deliver to make his revenge unforgettable? The Charleston harbor was alive with noise again, but this time not for a trial nor for a wedding. It was the annual gala of coal shipping, the first under its rightful name in more than a decade. Flags with the coal crest rippled above every ship, music spilled from the banquet hall, and captains and merchants from every coast gathered to pay respect to the man who had reclaimed the fleet. Ethan Cole entered not as a deckhand, not as a shadow, but as the master of the line. The tailored suit fit him like armor, the compass watch gleaming now proudly on his wrist. Whispers rippled as he passed. That's him, Cole's son, the man who worked every rank. Sailors who once mocked him stood taller, their eyes softened with something like pride. Claire was there too, lingering on the edge of the crowd. Her pearls were gone, her gown borrowed, her beauty dimmed by desperation. She clutched a glass too tightly, watching Ethan from the shadows. Every laugh, every toast made her chest tighten. She had once believed this life could be hers, and it might have been, had she not spat at the man who built it with silent hands. When Ethan took the stage, the room fell quiet. His voice carried steady and calm as though the sea itself hushed to listen. My father built this line not for ambition but for honor. He taught me that leadership is proven not by titles but by toil. I have been a deckhand, a bosun, a mate, and now I stand before you as owner. But let it be known, every man who sails under my flag will be paid fair and no greed will rot these ships again. Applause thundered. Sailors banged their glasses, captains rose to their feet, and in that thunder, Ethan's eyes found Claire's, standing at the back, trembling. For a heartbeat, silence existed only between them. She pushed forward, voice trembling, breaking the moment. Ethan, please. Her words echoed, unwanted, as dozens turned to look. Her eyes brimmed with tears, her voice raw. I was blind. I was a fool. Take me back, Ethan. Don't leave me with nothing. The room held its breath. Ethan descended the stage slowly, every step deliberate, until he stood inches from her. The crowd parted, hungry to hear. He lowered his voice so only she could hear, though the silence carried it anyway. You left me when I was nothing, Claire. Now you see what I've become. But understand this. He leaned closer, his words cold as iron. My revenge isn't in ruining you. It's in letting you live long enough to see everything you threw away. Claire's face crumpled, humiliation burning hotter than tears. The crowd turned back to Ethan, leaving her standing small, pearls of shame replacing jewels of pride. Ethan returned to the stage, raising his glass. To the future of coal shipping. The cheer that followed drowned out Claire's sobs echoing across the harbor. Flashback. A boy on the docks, his father's hand resting on his shoulder. One day, Ethan, the ships will be yours. But remember, the sea doesn't forgive betrayal. Neither should you. Now, under the golden light of lanterns and the roar of applause, Ethan Cole fulfilled that prophecy not just as owner, but as a man who had turned betrayal into brutal justice. Jack rotted in prison, Claire lived in humiliation, and Ethan's silence had become his most savage weapon.